Welcome, chosen ones. If you've found your way to this video, I believe it's not by accident. You were chosen, set apart for something greater, something sacred. There is a reason your journey has felt different, deeper, maybe even lonelier. You've been marked by God for a purpose the world can't always understand. That's why this message is for you. This isn't just another video to scroll past. This is a call to awaken something inside you, to explore the depths of your soul and to find strength in your solitude. Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover could shift your entire perspective on your journey, your pain, and your faith. So what is it that keeps tugging at your spirit when everything around you says you should feel normal? Why does the silence sometimes feel more alive than the noise? And what if the very solitude you've resented is the soil in which your calling is growing? In this message, we're going to take a step back from the distractions and look deeper into what it truly means to walk with God, to think spiritually, and to live with a faith that doesn't waver in the face of uncertainty. We'll explore how isolation can become a gift, how spiritual reflection is a gateway to clarity, and how your faith, when refined in quiet places, can transform everything around you. Are you tired of surface answers? Are you longing for meaning beyond the noise? Then you're in the right place. This video is an invitation to rediscover the God who speaks loudest in silence, the God who has not abandoned you, but is preparing you. Before we begin, I want to invite you to be part of something bigger. This is more than a moment, it's a movement. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, like no one truly understands your depth, your conviction, your calling, this community is for you. Watch this video all the way through, because we're going to break down what's really going on beneath the surface. We'll challenge assumptions, expand your thinking, and help you see your walk with God through a new lens. And if this message resonates with you, take a second to like this video so others can find it. If you're new here, I invite you to subscribe. We're building something special, a place for people like you who want to live intentionally, not aimlessly. And if you're feeling that stirring in your soul right now, drop 777 in the comments below. That's our sign of faith, alignment, and purpose. Let's begin this journey of yours right now. Let me take you to a moment you've probably experienced before. That quiet ache in your chest when you're surrounded by people but still feel alone. That whisper in the back of your mind saying you don't quite belong. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know this isn't rejection, it's redirection. What you're feeling isn't abandonment, it's an invitation. You've been pulled away not because something's wrong with you, but because something sacred is being built inside you. I've come to understand that those who are chosen by God are often placed on paths that strip away noise, distraction, and comfort. Not to punish them, but to prepare them. When I reflect on this kind of isolation, I don't see it as an accident. I see it as divine intention. Isolation is often the training ground for revelation. You see, when the world steps back, the voice of God steps forward. In silence, there's a sharpening. In solitude, there's a revealing. We live in a time where everyone wants to be seen, but very few are willing to be set apart. And yet, being chosen often means being removed from the crowd, so that your character can be refined in secret. God doesn't rush this process. He isolates to illuminate, to strengthen the roots, before showing the fruit. But here's something deeper. Spiritual solitude is not just about being alone. It's about what happens in that aloneness. It's where identity is forged. In the stillness, you're confronted with your truest self, stripped of titles, applause, or expectations. That's when real faith starts to take shape. It's not about believing in God when you're surrounded by support. It's about trusting Him when you feel invisible, when no one's clapping for your progress, when the silence is loud. That's where spiritual maturity is born, not in the crowd, but in the cave. I know this personally. I've seen how God removes comfort to reveal calling. I felt the sting of distance from people I loved and the disorientation of walking a road that few understood. But I also found something precious in that space: clarity, resilience, and a deeper awareness of God's presence. That kind of intimacy with the divine doesn't come when life is easy. It comes when everything familiar is stripped away and all you have left is Him. That's when you realize you are never alone. You are being set apart. So if you're in a season where the room is quiet and the phone doesn't ring as often, don't let that fool you. That stillness is sacred. That space is holy ground. You're not forgotten. You're being formed. What feels like isolation may be the beginning of your transformation. And sometimes, being chosen means being hidden until it's time to shine. Let me speak to something that sits quietly in the corners of your heart. You're longing for love, for connection, for companionship. You wonder why, despite your openness, your prayers, your hope, certain relationships just don't seem to stick. You watch others find love and build lives together while your path feels marked by delay or detours. I want to tell you what I've come to realize in my own spiritual reflections. It's not because you're unworthy of love. It's not because something is wrong with you. Quite the opposite. It's because God is doing something so precise, so intentional in your life that anything or anyone not aligned with that purpose can't stay. When the assignment on your life is great, your focus becomes sacred ground, and God protects that ground, even from the things you think you want most. As I've journeyed deeper into the meaning of being chosen, I've come to see how love, romantic or otherwise, can be both a gift and a test. Love, when placed in its rightful season, nourishes, it strengthens. But love that arrives too early or comes wrapped in the wrong timing becomes a distraction dressed as a blessing. That's the tension many of us don't talk about. You can be seeking connection and still be called to stay alone for a while. You can be full of love and still be asked to give it only to God in this season. And when that happens, it's not a punishment, it's spiritual preservation. You're being prepared for something deeper than just another relationship. You're being aligned with something eternal. Let's be honest, relationships can pull on the strings of your soul. They consume attention, they ignite emotions, and sometimes, without even realizing it, they shift your focus from the divine to the earthly. That's not because relationships are bad. They're beautiful, they're sacred. But for those on a spiritual mission, not every beautiful thing is meant to stay. When you are in a season of divine formation, your undivided attention becomes necessary. That's the season where God wants to speak without interruption, to shape you without interference. And often, He will remove even good things to give you the best thing, Himself. I've seen people compromise their spiritual path to hold on to someone who wasn't called to walk beside them. I've felt that tension too. The heart wants what the heart wants, but the spirit knows when something is not in alignment. You'll feel it in the subtle drift away from peace. You'll notice it in the way your spiritual hunger quiets down when certain people are around. That's not coincidence. That's your soul trying to guard what God is building. And the deeper your calling, the more sensitive your soul becomes to what distracts it. Sometimes, God will delay connection to deepen your conviction. He's not withholding love. He's teaching you to receive it through Him first, so that when love finally comes, you'll recognize it, but you won't worship it. This truth changed the way I saw my own path. I stopped asking, "Why am I alone?" and started asking, "What is God doing in this solitude that another person might distract me from?" That shift in thinking unlocked a new level of peace. It helped me realize that loneliness isn't always a lack. It's often an intentional pause, a sacred space, a quiet classroom where God teaches you about yourself, about His nature, and about how to love without losing sight of your purpose. And when love finally shows up, it won't pull you away from your calling, it will partner with it. So if you find yourself in a season where relationships feel distant or unavailable, don't rush to fill the space. Let it remain open for God's hand. He knows how to orchestrate divine timing better than we ever could. And the love He prepares for you won't compete with your calling, it will complement it. You are not being denied connection. You're being trained to discern which connections deserve access to your future. That is a sacred process. Don't despise it, lean into it, and let it shape you into someone who can love deeply but never lose sight of who you were created to be. If you're feeling the weight of isolation right now, like you're walking through a dry and empty place with no clear direction, let me offer you this: you are in good company. The path you're on may feel quiet, hidden, even forgotten, but it is the same road walked by some of the greatest figures in the Bible. I've spent years reflecting on this truth, and I've come to see that before God ever uses someone privately, that formation happens in the wilderness, in solitude, in the long stretches of silence where it seems like nothing is happening, but everything is happening. That's where the roots go deep. Take Moses, for example. Before he ever stood in front of Pharaoh, before he ever led a nation through parted seas, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. Not 4 weeks, not 4 months, 40 years, alone, forgotten by the world, living as a shepherd far from the palace where he was raised. But that desert wasn't a detour. It was the classroom. It was where God stripped away the noise of his past and began molding the man who would one day deliver Israel. His isolation became his preparation. And when God finally spoke to him through that burning bush, Moses didn't just hear words, he recognized the voice. That recognition came from spending time in stillness. He had been trained to listen in the quiet. Now, look at Jesus. The Son of God, full of power and purpose, didn't launch his ministry in front of crowds. He went to the wilderness. He fasted. He prayed. He faced the enemy alone. The Messiah didn't need a stage to prove his authority. He needed solitude to prepare his soul. And that wasn't weakness, that was wisdom. He knew that power without grounding becomes pride. So he allowed himself to be emptied before being elevated. That season of isolation wasn't a pause in his purpose, it was the ignition. When he emerged, he came out with clarity, conviction, and a mission that no one could stop. These aren't just stories, they're patterns. They show us that God often chooses the wilderness before the platform, the cave before the calling, the silence before the sound, and that truth changes how we see our own seasons of solitude. If God allowed Moses to be hidden for decades and Jesus to step into silence before stepping into influence, why would we expect anything different? I say this not to discourage you, but to remind you, your wilderness is not wasted. It is working something in you that comfort never could. And here's what I've come to believe after years of studying these examples. Isolation is not absence. It's divine presence in disguise. It's God removing distractions so he can speak to you directly. In the noise of life, it's easy to lean on people, applause, or progress to validate your calling. But in the quiet, all you have is him. And that's where your faith either crumbles or gets anchored. That's where you decide whether you believe because it's convenient or because it's true. And when you come out of that place, you're no longer moved by the opinions of people because you've already been refined by the voice of God. So if you're wondering why doors seem closed, why the phone is silent, why progress feels slow, it may not be an attack, it might be alignment. You might be in the exact space where God forms leaders, not followers, where he prepares messengers, not just listeners. The wilderness is not where you're lost, it's where you're located, by God for a reason, for a season. And what he starts in solitude, he will always reveal in his timing. Your story is not behind schedule. Your faith is not forgotten. You are in the hands of the same God who shaped Moses in the desert and strengthened Jesus in the wilderness. Trust the silence. Embrace the stillness. Because one day, when it's time to stand before your own Pharaoh or step into your divine assignment, you'll know that the wilderness didn't weaken you. It built you. And that will make all the difference. There is a moment that comes in every journey of faith when the silence feels too loud, the room feels too empty, and the heart begins to wonder if God has stepped away. If you've ever sat in that space, I want to speak directly to your soul. You are not alone. Not now, not ever. The presence of God is not defined by how you feel. It's anchored in a promise. And that promise is clear. I hold on tightly to the words found in Hebrews 13:05. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Not when you're struggling, not when you've lost direction, not when you've made mistakes. Never. As I've walked through seasons of my own isolation, I've realized that the deepest question many of us carry isn't whether God exists, but whether he is near. And in the quiet, it's easy to feel like he's far away. But faith, at its core, isn't built on feeling, it's built on trust. Trust that even when the light is dim, He is still guiding. Trust that even when you can't hear Him, He's still speaking. And trust that even when everyone else walks away, He stays. That's what makes Him unlike anyone else. People may get tired, people may change, people may fail, but God remains steady, constant, present. You see, there's a kind of companionship that only comes through spiritual solitude. When the voices fade and the noise dies down, there's a new awareness that awakens in the soul. That's where I found Him the closest, not in the crowds, not in the applause, but in the stillness where it was just me and Him. And what I discovered there was not a distant deity watching from above, but a loving Father sitting right beside me, a presence that didn't need to speak loudly to be heard, a comfort that didn't need explanation to be felt. That's when I began to understand something deeper. God is not intimidated by your loneliness. He is not confused by your pain. He is not absent in your silence. He is invested. He is watching. He is walking with you through every valley, every shadow, every delay. His love doesn't withdraw when things get dark. It draws closer. Because the very places we think are proof of His absence are often the places He uses to prove His faithfulness. Let me share something I've learned. God doesn't promise we won't face hardship. He promises we won't face it alone. That's a radical kind of love. A love that stays when everything else falls apart. A love that surrounds when the world turns its back. And once you've tasted that kind of presence, you stop begging for human validation. Because what God provides in the quiet far outweighs what people offer in the spotlight. His presence is not just comfort, it's power. It's the strength to stand when no one's clapping, the courage to continue when nothing makes sense, and the peace to rest even when the storm hasn't passed. And let's be honest, life will test you. There will be moments where your faith is stretched thin, where prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, and hope feels like a flickering flame. But in those very moments, His promise becomes your anchor. I will never leave you. That's not a cliche, that's a covenant. A divine assurance that no matter how far you fall, how many times you question, how long the silence lasts, He remains. So if you're listening to this with a heavy heart, wondering where God is in your loneliness, know this: He's closer than your breath, closer than the pain, closer than the tears you cry when no one is looking. You are not forgotten, you are not overlooked, you are not walking this path alone. His eyes are on you, His hand is over you, and His love surrounds you, even now. When you can't trace His hand, trust His heart. When you don't understand the process, hold on to the promise, because the God who called you is the same God who walks beside you. Not one step behind, not watching from a distance, but right here, with you. And that truth, more than anything else, will carry you through every storm, every season, every silent night. There's a kind of stillness that most people run from, but I have learned to lean into it. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's sacred. Isolation, when looked at through the eyes of the world, seems like a setback, but when seen through the lens of the Spirit, it's an invitation to draw closer to the only one who truly knows you. In my own reflections, I've come to understand that solitude is not the absence of purpose. It's the beginning of it. It's in isolation that the soul is stripped of pretense and performance. That's where true intimacy with God begins. When I wrote about the inner lives of characters in the Screwtape Letters or the journey through Narnia, it was never just about fiction, it was about spiritual formation, what happens in the unseen spaces of the heart. I was fascinated by how easily distraction and noise can pull us away from the still, small voice that calls us home. That voice, I believe, is clearest when everything else is quiet. And sometimes, it's not that God isn't speaking. It's that we've filled our lives with too much noise to hear Him. So, isolation becomes the means by which we're recentered, reawakened, realigned. There's something I saw over and over again in the lives of those who were called to greatness. They were also called to a season of separation. Not because they were being punished, but because they were being prepared. You can't walk in divine purpose while clinging to earthly approval. And so those of us who feel set apart are often misunderstood, even by those closest to us. That's why I believe spiritual loneliness is one of the most underestimated tools of growth. It doesn't just remove distractions, it refines our desires. It teaches us to hunger for what truly satisfies. In Narnia, when Lucy walks alone into the wardrobe and discovers a whole other world, she doesn't bring anyone with her at first. Her encounter was personal. It was meant just for her. That's how spiritual awakening often begins, not with a crowd, but with a whisper, not in chaos, but in quiet. And that quiet can feel like exile at first. But once you've tasted the presence of God in that place, you start to realize you weren't abandoned. You were invited deeper. I've met many people who fear solitude because it forces them to face themselves. But if we're honest, that's where the real transformation happens, when you're not performing for anyone. When you're not filtering your faith through others' expectations, that's when God meets you at your most authentic point. And I believe He prefers it that way. The more alone we are with Him, the more clearly we hear Him. And in that clarity, our identity begins to take shape, not as the world defines us, but as He does. One of the greatest misunderstandings about being chosen is thinking that it always feels good. It doesn't. It often feels heavy, slow, and painfully silent. But I believe that silence is holy, because in that stillness, your roots are growing deeper. And when the time comes for you to rise, you'll rise not with shallow charisma, but with unshakable conviction. You'll be ready, not because you were busy, but because you are still. You'll carry something real because you've spent time being refined by something greater than this world could ever offer. So if you find yourself walking alone, know that you're not lost. You're being led. You're not empty, you're being filled with something eternal. And though people may not understand your separation, God does. He designed it, He uses it. And one day, when your voice carries truth that shakes hearts and your presence brings peace into chaos, you'll look back and realize that the solitude was not a detour. It was the very place where your soul was made strong. In the end, it's not about escaping the world. It's about being equipped to live in it with clarity, purpose, and power. And sometimes, to be fully prepared, you have to walk through seasons where God is the only voice you hear, not because He wants you to be alone forever, but because He wants to be the first voice you trust. Let me tell you something that most people don't realize until they're deep in it. True leadership will cost you your comfort. If you are called to lead, you will, at some point, have to walk alone. That's not some romantic metaphor, it's reality. The higher the calling, the narrower the road. And not everyone can go with you. Not everyone will understand you. In fact, the weight of leadership often starts with a kind of divine separation, where God pulls you away from the crowd, not to isolate you for punishment, but to prepare you for purpose. If you feel like you're carrying something heavy on your own, maybe it's because you're being trusted with something sacred. I've come to understand that leadership isn't about being at the front of the crowd. It's about being willing to step away from the crowd entirely. It's about having the courage to walk in obedience, even when it feels like no one else sees the path you're on. Some of the most powerful people in history, those who truly shifted the course of humanity, first had to face deep loneliness. Elijah stood in a cave, crying out to God, wondering if he was the only one left. Jesus withdrew to the desert for 40 days, fasting, praying, confronting darkness with nothing but the word of God. Gandhi walked in silence for long periods, seeking clarity and conviction that couldn't be found in the noise of society. These weren't moments of retreat, they were moments of refinement, because a true leader doesn't emerge from applause, they rise from the ashes of silence. Now here's the deeper truth. Leadership without solitude is shallow. If you're not willing to be alone, you're not ready to carry the weight of real influence. Because leadership isn't just about making decisions, it's about becoming someone who can carry vision through storms, rejection, and confusion without losing heart. And that kind of strength is never built in comfort, it's built in silence. It's built when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when the only voice you have left to listen to is God's. And if you can follow that voice in the valley, you'll be able to carry it to the mountain. What I've come to believe is that God doesn't just hand out influence. He tests the heart first. And one of the most effective ways he does that is through separation. He'll allow you to be misunderstood. He'll let doors close. He'll strip away the need for approval. Not to break you, but to prove you. He wants to know, can you be trusted when the lights are off? Will you still walk in faith when no one is validating your steps? Because if you can carry the burden in secret, you'll be able to carry the mantle in public. But it always starts with being set apart. This is where many people turn back. The silence becomes too loud, the burden becomes too real. But the ones who keep going, those are the ones who change things. Not because they were the most talented or the most charismatic, but because they were faithful in solitude. Because they learned to lead their own soul before they tried to lead anyone else. And that's the kind of leadership God is looking for. Not the loudest, not the most popular, but the most obedient, the most surrendered, the most rooted. So if you're in a place right now where it feels like you're standing alone, I want you to hear this clearly. It doesn't mean you've missed it. It might mean you're right where you're supposed to be. You're not being overlooked. You're being equipped. And when the time is right, the very solitude that once felt like exile will be the reason you can lead with integrity, wisdom, and grace. The truth is, anyone can speak when the room is full, but only a leader can speak truth when the room is silent. That's why solitude is not just part of leadership, it's the foundation of it. And if you embrace it, it will shape you into the kind of person God can trust with his people, his purpose, and his power. There's a sacred silence that most people never make time for. A silence not filled with the noise of the world or the echo of our own worries, but the kind that opens the soul to something deeper. I've often looked at the lives of hermits, those who stepped away from society, not because they were broken or bitter, but because they were called. Their decision wasn't rooted in fear or escape. It was a bold, intentional act of devotion. They didn't withdraw from the world to avoid responsibility. They withdrew to hear God without interruption. What fascinated me most about these men and women wasn't their isolation. It was what that isolation produced. In solitude, something beautiful begins to unfold. When you strip away the busyness, the distractions, the constant hum of other people's expectations, you start to hear with new ears. And what you hear is not always loud, it's not always dramatic, but it is unmistakably holy. The voice of God, I've found, often whispers in the places where we've dared to become still. That's what the hermits understood. They weren't chasing isolation, they were chasing clarity. They longed for an intimacy with God that required a break from everything else. This kind of life isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause or attention. In fact, most people will never understand it. But that's the point. Divine encounters are rarely found in crowded rooms. They happen in caves, in deserts, on mountains, in the margins of life where very few are willing to go. And those who choose that path often come back with something powerful. They carry peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. They walk in wisdom that wasn't taught in books. They speak with an authority that comes from being in the presence of God, not just reading about Him. I believe that today, even if we don't live as full-time hermits, we are still invited into that rhythm. A rhythm of stepping back, tuning out the noise, and learning to sit with God without a time limit. The truth is, your soul was never designed to keep up with constant stimulation. You were created to hear, to feel, to discern, and those things take time, space, and intention. What the hermits teach us is that solitude isn't wasted time. It's where transformation begins. It's where shallow belief deepens into unshakable faith. There's also something else I've learned from their example. When you leave behind the noise of the world, you don't become less connected, you actually become more rooted. Not in trends, not in public opinion, but in truth, in eternal things. And from that place you begin to see differently. You don't just respond to life, you move with purpose, you speak with grace, you lead from love. That's the kind of life that changes people, not because it's loud, but because it's authentic. If you're in a season right now where you feel like you're being pulled into solitude, don't resist it. Don't assume something's wrong. Maybe, just maybe, it's an invitation. an invitation to step into the kind of relationship with God that goes beyond duty and enters into delight. A relationship not built on performance but presence. A space where you are fully known and deeply loved, not for what you do, but simply for who you are. So no, you may not live in a desert or wear robes or retreat to a monastery, but your heart can still become a sacred space, a place where the voice of God doesn't have to compete, a place where stillness becomes strength. And like those ancient hermits, you may come to discover that the most powerful way to live in this world is to be rooted beyond it. That is the beauty of holy separation, not withdrawal from life, but a deeper, quieter entrance into it. And from that place, everything begins to change. There is something no one tells you when you begin to walk in your calling. You won't fit in. Not with the crowd, not with what's common, and definitely not with the noise of what's popular. That realization doesn't come easy. In fact, at first it can feel like rejection, like you've been left out, pushed aside, or somehow missed the invitation to belong. But what I've come to understand through my own journey and years of spiritual reflection is this. When you've been set apart for a divine purpose, disconnection is not an accident. It's alignment. You don't belong to the crowd because you were never meant to follow it. Carrying a calling that stretches beyond the ordinary will always come with a cost. And one of the first things you lose is the illusion of belonging everywhere. You begin to see the world differently. You feel things more deeply. You ask questions others avoid. And while others are chasing approval, something inside you is craving truth. That craving doesn't make you strange. It makes you chosen. And being chosen means there are seasons when you will walk alone, not because you're broken, but because you're being built for something bigger than the moment. Now, let's get honest. Isolation is not easy. It's not romantic. It's not always peaceful. It can be quiet in the most painful ways. But here's the shift that changed everything for me. What if isolation isn't meant to harm you, but to heal you? What if it's not punishment, but preparation? You see, in solitude, the distractions fall away. The pressure to perform fades. And for the first time, you begin to face who you really are. Your fears, your doubts, your dreams, your faith. It's in that raw, honest place that growth begins. Real growth. The kind that doesn't come from applause, but from alignment. I believe that many people miss their calling because they run from the very space meant to shape them. They confuse separation with abandonment. But separation is often the evidence that you're being sanctified. You're not being cast out. You're being carved out. You're being drawn into a space where God can work without interruption. And when you finally surrender to that process, you stop seeing isolation as something to escape and start seeing it as something to embrace. Here's the deeper truth. Your purpose is too important to be developed in public. God does his best work in hidden places. He's not trying to hide you from the world. He's protecting you from premature exposure. Because if you rise before you're ready, what was meant to bless others might break you. So, he sets you apart. He keeps you in quiet places, not to delay your purpose, but to deepen it, not to stop your growth, but to stabilize your roots. So, if you're in that season now where the room feels quieter, where people don't understand your journey, where even your prayers seem to echo back in silence, breathe. You're not lost. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You are being formed in a sacred space. And the very things that feel like setbacks may be the very things that are shaping your strength, sharpening your vision, and solidifying your faith. And when the time comes, and it will come, you'll step out of that season not bitter, but better. Not weak, but wiser. Not unsure, but unshakable. Because what was built in the dark cannot be destroyed by the light. That's what it means to carry a divine mission. It means you walk through things others don't understand, so you can carry answers they didn't even know they needed. So don't fear the distance. Don't run from the quiet. Let it shape you. Let it mature you. Let it draw you closer to the one who called you, because if he called you, he will equip you. And part of that equipping happens when no one else is watching. That is the beauty of isolation, when you're chosen. It's not the absence of your purpose, it's the refining of it. And when it's finished, you won't just walk in your calling, you'll embody it, you'll lead with it. and you'll bless others through the strength that solitude built in you. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being unloved. It comes from being called. It creeps in quietly, not as a punishment, but as a signal that something inside you is shifting. If you've ever felt like you're walking a road no one else seems to understand, you're not alone in that feeling. But here's what I've come to realize through deep reflection. Loneliness, when seen through the eyes of faith, is not just an emotion. It's a process. It's the beginning of a spiritual excavation where the noise is stripped away and the soul is finally heard. Think of a river carving its way through solid rock. That doesn't happen in a moment. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes pressure. And yet, inch by inch, the water shapes the stone. That's what happens to those who are chosen. They don't explode into their calling. They're shaped into it. And often, that shaping begins in seasons of deep internal solitude. When the world is quiet, your thoughts speak louder. When friends fade, your questions rise to the surface. And it's there, in the rawness of your own heart, that you begin to dig beneath the surface and discover who you really are. That's what makes this part of the journey sacred. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. You can't fake your way through inner transformation. You can't speed it up. The loneliness forces you to slow down and listen to the questions you've buried, to the wounds you've avoided, and to the whispers of God you've tuned out. And what you find in that stillness is a version of you that's not built on applause or expectation, but on honesty. And that kind of honesty is what becomes the foundation for real faith. Now, the higher you climb, the fewer people you'll find beside you. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong, it's proof you're being elevated. Mountains don't get crowded at the summit, they get quiet. Because not everyone is called to go with you. And if you're not careful, you'll waste your strength trying to drag people with you who were never meant to make that climb. But when you let go of the need to be surrounded, something beautiful happens. Your vision clears, your spirit steadies, and your ears tune into the one voice that actually matters. I found that some of the greatest revelations in my life didn't come in moments of noise or celebration. They came in moments of total silence, when there was no plan, no audience, just me and my thoughts. And in that space, I didn't feel abandoned, I felt awakened. Because once you learn how to sit with yourself, to confront the discomfort, to embrace the unknown, you stop needing the world to fill your emptiness. You start allowing God to define your identity instead. So no, loneliness isn't something to fear, it's something to face. It's the path that leads you inward before God can send you outward. It's the refining ground that turns self-doubt into self-awareness and confusion into clarity. And while the process is never comfortable, it's always necessary. Because what you gain in solitude is not just insight, it's intimacy with your own soul and with the one who created it. If you feel like you're walking alone right now, don't rush to fill the space. Let it do its work. Let it stretch you. Let it break you open in the best way possible. Because you're not just passing through emptiness, you're passing through revelation. And when it's all said and done, you won't just know yourself better. You'll see your calling with new eyes. You'll trust your path more deeply. And you'll walk forward, not afraid of being alone, but empowered by the strength you found in that very solitude. This isn't the part of the journey most people talk about, but it's the part that builds everything else. So, if you're here, standing in the quiet, feeling unsure, take heart. The work happening inside you right now is sacred. It's slow, yes, but it's also sure. And one day when you look back on this stretch of road, you'll realize it wasn't wasted. It was the very path that made you who you were always meant to be. Some of the deepest revelations I've ever had didn't come when I was surrounded by people, but when I felt completely alone. I didn't ask for solitude. It came to me like a storm. One day, I looked up and realized that the people who once felt close had become distant. Conversations faded, invitations stopped. Even those I loved the most felt out of reach. At first, I took it personally. I questioned what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. It felt like a silent punishment I didn't understand, like being left out of a life I used to belong to. But as the silence settled in, something unexpected began to happen. I started hearing things I had never heard before, not with my ears, but within my spirit. In that stillness, I became aware of how much noise I had been living with, internal and external. The pressure to please, the constant comparison, the subtle fears I buried under busyness. With no one left to perform for, I came face to face with the version of myself I had been avoiding, and strangely, that confrontation didn't break me. It freed me. It was in that season of separation that I first learned what true intimacy with God feels like. I didn't need perfect prayers. I didn't need answers. I just needed honesty. I brought my questions, my pain, my loneliness, and He met me there. Not with immediate solutions, but with presence. And that presence was enough to start changing me from the inside out. Slowly, I stopped viewing isolation as punishment and started recognizing it as a gift, a holy invitation to become someone I couldn't have become, surrounded by distraction. Looking back now, I see clearly that being separated from those familiar places and faces was the very thing that made space for transformation. It created room for reflection. It allowed me to notice the patterns I had been stuck in for years, and it helped me start walking in alignment with who I was created to be, not who I had been trying to be for others. That kind of clarity only comes when everything else is stripped away. You learn to let go of false identities. You stop clinging to relationships that require you to shrink. You begin to build your life not on what people expect, but on what your soul truly needs. The irony is, I had to be pulled away from everything I thought I needed to discover what I really needed. I had to be emptied to be filled again, this time with something eternal. And that transformation wasn't loud, it wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, steady, sacred. It happened in late nights of silence, early mornings of prayer, long walks with no destination. It happened as I began to surrender, not all at once, but piece by piece. When pride, fear, shame, doubt, they all began to loosen their grip. What I discovered is this: sometimes the very thing we fear, being alone, is the doorway to the life we've been praying for. We ask God to change us, to grow us, to show us who we are, and often His first step is to get us alone so He can finally speak without interruption. In that space, He doesn't just give you answers, He gives you yourself, the real you. The one He formed before the world told you who to be. And when you find that version of you, you stop needing constant validation. You start moving differently. You begin to trust the quiet places. So now when I look back on that season of solitude, I don't call it a curse. I call it a turning point. I don't regret the silence. I'm grateful for it. Because that silence became the soil where something sacred was planted. And even now, I go back to that quiet again and again, not to escape, but to remember. To remember who I am, to remember who God is, and to remember that the most powerful transformations never start on stages. They start in silence. They start when you're alone with your questions and God answers with Himself. There's a moment in your spiritual journey when people begin to fall away, not with drama, not with conflict, but quietly, almost without explanation. You don't argue, you don't push, but the distance grows. At first, you might take it personally. You might wonder what you said, what you did, what changed. But over time, you begin to understand a deeper truth. When you're chosen, your presence carries light, and that light exposes what others aren't ready to face. And I don't say that with pride. I say it with reverence. Because walking with God brings a certain clarity that not everyone is prepared to stand next to. The closer you get to the truth, the more your life becomes a mirror to those around you. And not everyone is ready to look into that mirror. When your values begin to shift, when your conversations turn toward purpose, when your decisions reflect discipline and faith, it makes others uncomfortable if they're not on that same path. And without even realizing it, they begin to pull back. Not because they hate you, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your light shines on places they've kept hidden. That reaction isn't rejection, it's reflection. What I've learned through my own seasons of solitude is that spiritual growth naturally refines your relationships. It doesn't mean you love people any less. It simply means you've stopped hiding who you are to make them feel more comfortable. And when you stop shrinking, when you start standing tall in your calling, the room shifts. Some people lean in, others drift away. That's not failure, that's clarity. It's the holy separation that makes space for divine alignment. And yes, it hurts. Letting go of relationships that once felt like home is never easy. Watching people disappear without explanation leaves scars. But over time you begin to see that what left made room for what's real. God doesn't subtract to punish, He subtracts to protect. He filters out what can't walk with you into the next season. Because the calling on your life requires people who can handle the weight of your light, not people who crumble under it. That's the power of isolation. It doesn't just clear your calendar. It clears your vision. You begin to see who's truly aligned with your spirit and who was just along for the comfort. And when you stop chasing connection and start attracting alignment, everything changes. You no longer beg for belonging. You discern who's meant to build with you, walk with you, grow with you, and the circle may get smaller, but it becomes stronger. I remember the moment I stopped mourning the distance and started honoring the purification. It was like I finally exhaled. I realized that every relationship God removed made space for something deeper, something truer. People who speak life instead of doubt. People who see your calling and don't compete with it. People who challenge you spiritually, not pull you backwards. And I came to believe that one true soul aligned with your purpose is worth more than 100 surface-level friendships that only like the version of you that stays small. So if you're watching people walk away, if you're feeling the sting of distance, don't rush to fill the void. Let the pruning do its work. Because you're not being emptied, you're being refined. God is making room for divine connections, relationships that nourish instead of drain, bonds that elevate instead of limit. And while it may feel lonely at first, I promise you this: what remains will be rooted in truth, in purpose, and in mutual spiritual growth. This is part of what it means to be chosen. You carry a frequency that not everyone can handle. Your presence disrupts stagnancy. Your faith convicts. Your vision challenges the norm. And that's not something to hide, that's something to steward. So walk boldly, even if you walk alone for a while, because God is not just calling you out, He's calling you up. And when He's done rearranging what surrounds you, you'll look around and realize the ones who stayed didn't just accept your light, they honored it. And that's when you'll know you're no longer walking in circles, you're walking in alignment. There's something powerful happening inside you, even if you can't quite put it into words. You're not just changing your habits or your thinking, you're shifting at a deeper level. Your energy, your presence, the way you carry yourself. It's different now. And here's what I've come to understand through deep spiritual reflection. When you begin to walk in alignment with God's calling on your life, your very being starts to release a different kind of frequency. It's not forced, it's not loud, but it's undeniable. You emit a spiritual vibration that can either comfort or convict everyone around you. Some people will be drawn to you without knowing why. They'll feel peace in your presence, clarity in your words, and strength in your silence. Others, however, will feel something entirely different: discomfort, resistance, even agitation. And the truth is, it has very little to do with you personally. It has everything to do with the energy you carry. When you've been refined by God, when you've chosen truth over comfort, your frequency begins to challenge the atmosphere around you. You don't have to preach. You don't have to push. Just by being who you are, you reveal what others might be trying to avoid. That's the spiritual weight of being chosen. Your energy speaks before you say a word. Your discernment notices what others overlook, and because of that, you no longer tolerate what once seemed acceptable. You become more aware of how certain people drain your spirit. You start sensing when a room shifts, not just physically, but spiritually. And that awareness isn't paranoia, it's protection. It's God heightening your sensitivity so you can preserve your peace. As you grow in this awareness, something shifts in how you engage with people. You stop chasing approval. You stop entertaining surface-level conversations that have no depth. You stop forcing yourself to remain in environments that disrupt your clarity. And it's not about thinking you're better. It's about understanding that your inner peace is sacred. It's the foundation of your purpose, and anything that consistently disturbs it cannot have free access to you. I've lived this. I've walked into rooms where my presence changed the tone, not because I said something, but because light always reveals what darkness wants to hide. And over time, I learned to stop apologizing for that. I stopped trying to dim myself to make others comfortable. Because the more you dim your light, the more you delay your mission. God didn't call you to blend in, He called you to stand out, for a reason, for a purpose, for His glory. And here's what's even more fascinating. When you begin to vibrate at a higher spiritual frequency, you start attracting people who carry that same frequency. You begin building connections that feel divine, effortless, and aligned. These aren't relationships based on convenience. They're built on calling. These are the people who don't just accept your light, they reflect it. They pour into you as much as you pour into them. And suddenly, your circle may be smaller, but it's stronger, it's more intentional, and it's filled with people who push you toward your destiny, not your distractions. This journey teaches you something vital. Not everyone has the capacity to walk with you. And that's okay. Some people were meant for who you used to be, not who you're becoming. And as painful as that realization can be, it also brings peace. Because once you stop trying to hold on to what no longer fits, your hands are free to receive what God has prepared for you. So don't ignore the shifts happening inside you. That inner stirring, that sensitivity, that craving for peace, it's all part of the transformation. You're not just growing, you're being elevated, and elevation always requires separation. Your energy is not random, it's divine. It's what sets you apart. It's what equips you to carry the light of God into places that have been stuck in the dark. And when you finally accept that your presence is powerful, not because of you, but because of what God is doing through you, you stop fearing who walks away. You stop shrinking in rooms that can't hold your calling. You stop apologizing for your discernment, your depth, your peace. Because you weren't created to be comfortable, you were created to be impactful. And that impact starts from within. There's something I need to make clear about walking a path that feels lonely. It doesn't mean you're better than anyone else. It doesn't mean you've reached a higher level or unlocked some secret others haven't found. What it means, quite simply, is that your path is different. You've been called into something that demands clarity, obedience, and unwavering focus. And when that calling begins to grow louder, you naturally begin to separate, not to elevate yourself above others, but to stay honest with the mission that's been placed on your life. I've seen how easy it is for solitude to be misunderstood. Some people look at your distance and assume pride. They think you've changed, grown cold, or even become self-righteous. But what they don't see is the weight you're carrying. They don't see the quiet prayers, the sleepless nights, the inner wrestling. They don't understand that silence wasn't a decision made out of ego. It was a response to a higher calling. And when that calling truly grips your heart, you realize something powerful. You can't afford to walk in every direction. You have to walk in the one that was meant for you. And that path often leads you through seasons of separation. You stop engaging in conversations that drain you. You stop saying yes to things that distract you. You start narrowing your focus, protecting your peace, and moving with deeper intention. It's not because you're trying to prove something, it's because you're trying to remain faithful to what God whispered in the secret place. You can't afford to compromise what's sacred just to stay comfortable. I've felt this in my own life, this pull to simplify, to declutter, to protect the flame that God is building within me. And while it hurt to see some relationships fade, I began to understand that the people who stayed were not just kind, they were kindred. They didn't just like the version of me that was convenient, they honored the version of me that was becoming. These are the people who aren't threatened by your transformation, they're inspired by it. And you don't have to explain yourself to them because they're walking a similar road. They get it, they feel the same stirring, they've tasted the same solitude. This is what I've come to treasure most about divine alignment. You stop collecting people and you start recognizing who's truly assigned to your life. The ones who remain are not clinging, they're resonating. They're not draining you, they're sharpening you. And even if the circle gets smaller, it gets stronger. Because now every relationship you keep is rooted in truth, mutual purpose, and spiritual connection. And yes, there will still be moments where it stings. There will be times when you miss the comfort of being widely accepted, when you long for the ease of belonging in every room. But then, something deeper speaks to you, a reminder that what you've been called to do can't be built on popularity. It has to be built on purity. And that means some people, some places, and some habits just won't fit anymore. Not because they're evil, but because they're not aligned. So, if you're in that place now, where your path feels narrower, your relationships feel fewer, and your heart feels stretched, don't confuse that with loss. See it for what it is: refinement. You're not isolating to hide. You're stepping back to honor the assignment. You're choosing substance over spectacle. You're choosing growth over noise, and in doing so, you're becoming more honest with your calling than ever before. Let that be enough. Let it be your peace. You don't need to justify your process. You don't need to convince anyone of your direction. The ones meant to walk with you will understand without being told. They'll find you not because you called them, but because they too were called. And together, you'll move not with noise, but with purpose, not with crowds, but with clarity. That's what happens when you stop chasing validation and start living from a place of spiritual conviction. In the end, this journey was never about proving anything to the world. It was about being faithful to what God placed within you. And when that becomes your focus, you'll discover a freedom that no applause can offer, a peace that comes not from being seen, but from being true. There's a truth I've come to hold close, especially in the moments when life feels the most relentless. God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't allow storms without purpose, and He doesn't test the ones He hasn't chosen to carry something greater. When you feel the weight pressing down, when the road gets narrow and the heat rises, it's not because you're forgotten. It's because you're being forged. And I say that not as a theory, but from lived experience. I've walked through my own fire, and I've learned that trials aren't signs that God has abandoned you, they're proof that He's preparing you. You see, when God sets you apart, He also sets you through pressure, through pruning, through moments that stretch your faith until you're forced to lean on nothing but His word. These moments don't feel holy at the time, they feel heavy, but they are the very soil where spiritual maturity is grown. And it's not always the grand trials that shape us most. It's the silent ones, the private struggles, the nights where you question everything, the days where you pray and nothing seems to change. Yet somehow, you keep walking, you keep trusting. And that, right there, is where God begins to refine you. What I've learned is that faith that's never tested is faith that's never proven. Anyone can believe when it's easy, but real faith, deep, unshakable faith, is formed in the middle of the unknown, in the waiting, in the wrestling. It's when you don't know how, when, or even why, and still you choose to stay planted. That's the kind of faith God is after. Because He's not trying to break you down, He's building you up. And the bigger the purpose, the deeper the foundation has to be. Think about it this way. No warrior is sent into battle without training. No leader is given authority without preparation, and no vessel is trusted with glory until it's first been tested in fire. That's how God works. He doesn't rush the process. He doesn't skip the shaping. He allows you to walk through just enough challenge to strip away your pride, refine your perspective, and teach you to depend fully on Him. Because what He's preparing you to carry can't be held with fragile hands. It takes strength. And that strength is only found through struggle. And I get it. Sometimes the battle feels endless. You cry out, wondering when the breakthrough will come. But here's what I know. Every trial is doing something, even when you don't see it. It's producing endurance. It's teaching patience. It's revealing what's inside of you that comfort never could. And one day, when you're standing in the place God promised, you'll look back and realize the hardship was never meant to crush you. It was meant to carve you into the person capable of holding what's next. So don't run from the difficulty. Don't despise the refining. Lean into it. Ask God what He's showing you in the storm. Ask him what he's developing in your character, your faith, your focus. Because he's not just trying to change your circumstances, he's trying to change you. And when the transformation happens inside first, nothing outside can shake it. That's the beauty of walking with God. Your trials become tools. Your pain becomes preparation. Your scars become stories. And your wilderness becomes the classroom where you learn to trust like never before. I've seen this pattern in every person God ever used in a mighty way. They didn't rise by accident. They rose by fire. They were shaped in silence. They were refined in pain. And they came out not bitter, not weaker, but wiser. Not empty, but full of purpose. So if you're in the thick of it right now, if the pressure is building and the way forward seems unclear, don't lose heart. God is not punishing you. He's positioning you. He's strengthening the very parts of you that will be needed later. And though it hurts now, it's not the end. It's the in-between. It's the sacred middle ground between who you were and who you're becoming. Let this season do what it was sent to do. Let it make you. Let it mold you. Let it draw out the gold that was hidden beneath the surface. Because the refining isn't about destruction, it's about revelation. And when it's over, you won't just walk in your purpose. You'll walk in power. You'll walk in clarity. And you'll walk in a testimony that proves this truth. God didn't take you through the fire to burn you. He took you through it to bless you. Failure is a part of the human story. And even in Scripture, we see that some of the most significant figures stumbled when faced with temptation. I've often reflected on these stories, not to judge them, but to understand the depth of our human frailty and the necessity of grace. When we talk about being chosen or walking in divine purpose, we must also talk about the moments when we fall short, because every calling comes with a test, and not everyone passes the first time. But there's a lesson in that too, and it's one we can't ignore. Let's start where it all began, Adam and Eve. They were placed in a garden of abundance, given everything they needed, and yet when the voice of temptation slithered into their hearts, they doubted the very God who created them. Their fall didn't come from ignorance, it came from desire. The desire to know more, to reach beyond the boundary God had set. And in that moment of weakness, they chose rebellion over trust. What strikes me most is that their downfall didn't come through violence or chaos. It came through suggestion. Just one whispered question. Did God really say? That's how temptation works. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sounds like reason. Sometimes it feels like a shortcut. And if we're not rooted in truth, we fall into compromise, just like they did. But they weren't the only ones. The Israelites, God's chosen people, witnessed miracles with their own eyes. They saw seas split, manna fall, and water pour from rocks. Yet when faced with hunger, thirst, or fear, they questioned God's faithfulness. Over and over, they chose complaints over trust, idols over intimacy, fear over obedience. They failed their tests not because they didn't know God, but because they didn't trust Him when it mattered most. And then there's Peter, the bold disciple, the one who swore he'd never deny Jesus. But when the pressure came, when fear rose up in the shadows of that courtyard, he did exactly what he said he wouldn't. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. He crumbled. He lied. He walked away from his courage. And yet, what breaks me every time I read that story is what happened next. Jesus looked at him, not with wrath, but with knowing. Because God isn't surprised by our failures. He sees them before we do, and He already has a plan to redeem them. I share these stories because it's easy to believe that failure disqualifies us, that if we stumble, if we fall, if we give in during our weakest moments, God will turn away. But the truth is, these biblical failures didn't end the story. They became part of the story. They taught us that even the chosen can be tempted. Even the strong can break. Even the faithful can falter. And that's why we need more than discipline. We need grace. We need to be reminded that God doesn't call the perfect. He perfects the called through mercy, correction, and love. But make no mistake, temptation is real. It is strongest not when we're at our best, but when we're depleted. when we're tired, isolated, misunderstood. That's when the enemy whispers. That's when the shortcut feels right. That's when the lie looks easier than the truth. And if we're not anchored in God's word, we will find ourselves drifting, just like the ones before us. That's why spiritual strength isn't about emotional height, it's about consistency. It's about knowing where to run when the pressure hits. So, here's what I've learned. Don't wait until the temptation shows up to decide who you are. Decide now. Set your roots deep. Build your life on God's promises so that when the winds blow, you don't collapse. Because the trials will come, the tests will come, and yes, you might stumble. But if your heart is surrendered, if your eyes are fixed, you will rise again, just like Peter, just like the remnant of Israel, just like every flawed, chosen soul who fell but got back up. In the end, these stories aren't about failure, they're about what comes after. They're about the God who meets us in the ashes and breathes life again. They're about the Savior who restores us, not because we earned it, but because He loves us. So don't be afraid of the test. Don't be ashamed of the stumble. Let it drive you closer. Let it refine your faith, because the ones who are called will always be tested, and the ones who endure will be shaped into vessels of power, compassion, and purpose. One of the most difficult things about walking in truth is feeling like you're walking alone. And let's be honest, loneliness has a weight to it. It sits on your chest, presses on your mind, and makes you question whether the path you're on is even worth it. But here's what I've come to realize. The discomfort of being alone is far better than the emptiness of betraying yourself. And in a world that constantly tells you to blend in, to quiet your voice, to play it safe, choosing to stay true to who you are is not weakness. It's a declaration of strength. You see, this world isn't built to celebrate the different. It's built to mold you into something familiar, predictable, and easy to control. It rewards imitation and punishes authenticity. So when you stand out, when your values don't bend, when your convictions hold firm, when your light refuses to dim, it's not surprising that resistance shows up. But don't let that resistance make you shrink. Don't let the silence convince you that something's wrong. The very thing that sets you apart is the thing God wants to use. Staying true to yourself doesn't mean being stubborn. It means having integrity. It means knowing your worth without needing constant validation. It means showing up every day, even when no one claps for you, even when no one sees the quiet work you're doing behind the scenes. That kind of consistency, that kind of honesty, that's what makes room for God to bring the right people, the right opportunities, the right alignments into your life. And yes, there will be times when the path feels narrow, when you look around and wonder if you're the only one choosing conviction over convenience. But take heart, you're not alone. There are others like you, others who've made peace with being misunderstood because they're more interested in being aligned than accepted. And when your life becomes a reflection of truth, you start to attract people who aren't threatened by your light. They're drawn to it, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And that kind of realness is rare. I've lived through seasons where my authenticity cost me friends, opportunities, even relationships that once felt essential. But now I see what walked away was never meant to stay. And what remains, what was drawn in during the quiet, is solid, unshakable, rooted. Because when you stop pretending, you give others permission to be real too. Your honesty becomes an invitation. Your integrity becomes a foundation for relationships that can actually hold the weight of your calling. So if you're in that place right now, feeling disconnected, questioning your direction, wondering why the crowd is thinning, don't give in to discouragement. Don't let loneliness convince you to abandon the truth. Stand tall in it. Speak it with gentleness and power. Live it with courage. Because the more you walk in your truth, the more your life begins to align with the rhythm of your calling. And in that rhythm, everything starts to shift. Your peace deepens. Your vision sharpens. Your confidence grows. Not in what you've done, but in who you've become. And let me tell you something from personal experience. When the right people do show up, and they will, you won't have to explain yourself. They'll see you. They'll recognize you, they'll resonate with you because they're walking in truth too. They've felt the sting of being set apart. They know what it's like to be called different, and they'll value your presence not because of what you can offer them, but because of who you are. That's the beauty of living from a place of spiritual authenticity. You stop performing and start becoming. You stop chasing connection and start attracting purpose. And you realize that being real, even when it's costly, is always worth it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about fitting in. It's about fulfilling what you were created for. So walk your path with your head held high. Let the world misunderstand you if it must. Let the noise fade. Let the old circles break. Because what God is building in you requires honesty, integrity, and courage. And as long as you keep showing up with your heart open and your spirit steady, the right people, the right moments, and the right doors will find their way to you. You don't have to force it. You just have to keep walking in truth. Let me leave you with something that matters more than anything else I've said. Your story is not over. Not even close. And no matter where you find yourself right now, whether you're on the mountaintop full of clarity and fire, or in the valley wrestling with questions you've never dared to ask, you are still part of a divine narrative that's unfolding with purpose. You are never meant to walk this road alone. And that's why I want to invite you into something deeper, something sacred, something lasting. This isn't just a message to listen to. It's a space to belong. If something in these words has stirred your heart, then know this: you're not the only one feeling it. There are others just like you, quietly walking through seasons of refinement, facing trials with trembling faith, choosing truth over comfort, light over fear. They too carry stories of transformation, of pain turned into wisdom, of solitude turned into strength. And when those stories are shared, something powerful happens. Walls come down, hearts open up, and the Spirit of God moves in the space between. So I invite you to make space in your life for moments like this, sacred pauses where the soul can breathe again. Speak your truth in prayer. Reflect on where you've been and ask God where He's taking you next. Let the journey become more than survival. Let it become surrender. Because faith is personal, yes, but it was never meant to be private. We grow when we allow God to use even the quietest parts of our story to strengthen someone else, even if that someone is our future self. If this message has touched something deep in you, I encourage you to stay. Don't just rush past this. Let it settle into your bones. Let it shape your rhythm, your posture, your choices. Continue this journey of discovering God more fully, of listening more intently, of learning how to carry your calling with both strength and humility. Walk with intention, not just for where you're going, but for who you're becoming. This isn't about content, it's about communion. And now, as we come to a close, I invite you into a holy moment. Let this be more than just another word in your day. Let it be a shift in your spirit. Take a deep breath and for just a moment, set aside the worry. Lay down the questions. Let go of the noise that's been swirling in your mind. Step into this sacred space with me, a space where peace isn't earned but given, where love isn't earned but received, where the presence of God meets you right where you are and reminds you of who you are. Let these final words sink into your soul, not as poetry, but as promise. You are seen, you are loved, and you are chosen, not by the world, but by the one who formed you, who knows your heart better than you do, and who has walked with you through every silent storm. And He's not finished with you. He's just getting started. So let this be your prayer. Lord, I don't want to walk in fear anymore. I want to walk in faith. I want to be who you created me to be, even if the world doesn't understand it. Even if the road is quiet. Even if I have to walk alone for a while. Give me the strength to keep showing up, the courage to speak truth, and the grace to carry peace wherever I go. Let this closing moment be a turning point, a new beginning, a reminder that faith is not just something we hold. It's something we live, breathe, and carry with us through every step of this beautiful, unpredictable, sacred journey. You are not walking alone. and you never will be. As the light of morning breaks and a new day begins, there is a sacred stirring that calls us to awaken not just our bodies, but our hearts. In the rhythm of creation, morning is more than routine. It's a divine reminder that God's mercy is new again. The night has passed, but with it comes a fresh invitation. Not to rush into the demands ahead, but to begin with presence. The invitation is clear. It echoes through the scriptures. In Matthew 11:28, I once reflected deeply on those words of Jesus. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That promise isn't just poetic, it's powerful. It means we don't have to start this day carrying yesterday's weight. This sacred moment before the world takes hold is not empty. It's an offering, a declaration, a quiet dedication of the day ahead to the one who governs time. And, as I've come to see, it's also a practice of trust. We rise not because we know everything that's coming, but because we know the one who walks before us. Psalm 4:8 reminds us of God's protection. And though it speaks of night, its truth carries into the dawn. In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. This morning, may that same peace go with us into all we face. So let us come before God now, not with busyness, but with reverence, not with a to-do list, but with surrender. Let this be our prayer. Heavenly Father, as this new day begins, I come to you in stillness. The world is waking up, but before the noise finds me, I want to find you. I bring to you the weight of what lies ahead, the expectations, the uncertainties, the responsibilities I cannot escape. I bring them all to you because you said I could. You invited the weary to come. Lord, I thank you for being constant when so much feels unsure, for being present when the day stretches wide with tasks and demands, for being the peace at the core of my soul. This morning, I ask for your guidance. Not the kind that shouts, but the steady, quiet voice that leads from within. Let it settle in my heart and in my schedule. Let it shape my conversations, direct my choices, and anchor my thoughts in your truth. As I rise to meet this day, I ask that your presence go before me. Let no distraction derail me. Let no fear take root. Let your wisdom guard my mind and your grace cover every interaction. Let your spirit move through every room I enter, every word I speak, every task I complete. This is not just a day, it's a mission field, a chance to reflect you, a chance to bring heaven to earth. God, I place my family in your care. I place my work in your hands. I place my time, my energy, and my hopes at your feet. You are God, and I am not. You hold this day already. Teach me to move through it not in anxiety, but in confidence. Teach me to release outcomes, not in apathy, but in faith. I don't need to control everything ahead. I just need to trust that you are in it, and you are. Thank you, Father, for the breath in my lungs, for the roof over my head, for the opportunities in front of me that I didn't even see coming. Thank you for shielding me from what I wasn't ready to face. You are my refuge, my provision, my compass. I don't take that for granted. Even now, as I speak these words, I feel you near, closer than the sun on my skin, closer than the thought I just had. Thank you. Lord, I ask that today would not just be productive, but purposeful. Help me not just check boxes, but carry meaning. Breathe life into my routines. Let there be joy in the ordinary. Let there be presence in the pause. Let there be power in the still moments. Awaken me not just physically, but spiritually. Let me notice you in the details, in the quiet, in the unexpected. And for those moments in the day when stress threatens my peace, when pressure rises, when disappointment comes faster than I can handle, remind me again that I am not alone. Even in the rush, you are steady. Even in the noise, you are near. Teach my heart to recognize your presence in the middle of movement. Teach my soul to listen, even when the world is loud. You are still here. You have always been. Jesus, I ask that you surround every person who wakes up heavy this morning, those facing things they haven't spoken about, those dragging yesterday's pain into today. those unsure if they have the strength to keep going. Cover them in your mercy. Speak gently to their hearts. Let them know that this morning is not the end. It's a beginning. Fill them with your hope, your strength, your peace. And Lord, I pray for the courage to walk through today with integrity, with clarity, with grace. May I live this day not for the approval of man, but for the pleasure of your heart. Let my actions honor you. Let my thoughts reflect you. Let my life preach without needing a stage. This morning I surrender control, and through this day I will walk in boldness, not because of what I bring, but because of what you've already done. So now I rise. I breathe deeply. I shake off the residue of yesterday. I lift my eyes. I lift my hands. I lift my heart, because I know that you are here. And where you are, there is peace. Where you are, there is strength. And I am ready. In the name of Jesus, I rise with intention. I move with purpose. And I trust you to go ahead of me. Thank you, Lord, for this morning, for this breath, for this mission. Amen. As this sacred time comes to a close, I want to invite you to pause and reflect on what you've just experienced. You didn't come here by accident. You were led. And if your heart feels a little lighter, if your spirit feels a little clearer, then give thanks, not to the world, but to the one who kept watch over you while you rested, who listened to your prayer even when the words were unspoken, and who never left your side, not even for a moment. Thank you, Lord, for protecting me through the night, for giving me breath, for granting peace when the world around me offered none. Now, as a new day begins, I lift my eyes and say, lead me, Father. Lead my words so that they reflect grace. Lead my thoughts so that they align with truth. Lead my hands so that they serve, and my steps so that they walk in love. I don't just want to exist today, I want to live purposefully. I want to represent you in the way I speak, in how I act, and in the way I carry myself. Let my presence bring calm. Let my voice bring clarity. Let my life shine, not for recognition, but as a reflection of your light. And I make this promise, not just to feel faith, but to walk in it, to live it when no one's watching, to hold on to it when it gets hard. I commit to being a vessel of blessing, not just receiving your goodness, but sharing it freely. Use me, God, to be the reason someone else sees hope today. Let me be the light in someone's dark hour. Let me carry your peace into rooms that have long forgotten how peace feels. This is not just about me, it's about the kingdom. It's about the call. And I say yes to it. To you listening right now, yes, you. I want to remind you of this truth. You are stronger than you feel. You are braver than you believe. You are more equipped than you know. The fire you carry was placed there for a reason. Don't let fear extinguish it. Don't let the weight of the world make you forget who you are. You are chosen. You are called. And your journey doesn't end here. Keep going. Keep believing. Keep rising. Because ahead of you is not just survival, it's victory. If this message has spoken to your heart, I invite you to support what we're building together. Press the like button. It helps this message reach others who need it just as much as you did. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, not just for more content, but to become part of a growing community of believers who are serious about faith, action, and living with purpose. And if you feel led, type 777 in the comments below. Join us, share your story, and see how faith deepens when it's shared. There's a place for you here, and your journey is just beginning.